To think that this movie franchise inspired toys, video games, and a Saturday morning cartoon series, it's pretty hysterical. What's up, everybody? So, this is my old school review of The Karate Kid Part 2, starring Ralph Macchio and Pat Morita, and again directed by John Avildsen. Now, I would say this is probably the weakest in the series. Having said that, it is the one that I watched over and over. I watched this one more than 1 and 3, probably put together. And I think that has a lot to do with the world of the Karate Kid getting a little bigger, because it is not just Daniel's story throughout all of this. Now they're bringing in, some of Mr. Miyagi's backstory and his history and where he comes from. And one of the things that I really enjoyed is that it picks up exactly after the first one ended. So you see kind of the aftermath of what happens after that when Daniel wins the tournament, and how Kreese reacts to it with his students, and how Mr. Miyagi steps in and deals with that situation. So most of the time, a lot of sequels, they just, okay, it's a few years later, and it's very, very separate. I really appreciate how connected really all three of them are. I told you before, I'm not really doing one on the fourth installment. To me, it's all about Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, and that relationship and how it progresses over time. At the same time, because this movie came out 2 years after Part 1. So in order, it's 1984 Part 1, then 86, then 89 for the third one. And so a lot of years have gone by, but as far as the movie is concerned, it's really just the course of like 1 year. So I think one of the main criticisms that I don't think is necessarily justified is that Daniel's character doesn't evolve that much, when in reality he's not really supposed to be so different. One of the things I kept seeing, and noticing is that like he's kind of the same reactionary hothead in Part 2 that he was in the first one, and it's like, of course, he's still just 17 years old. Yes, he overcome and kind of dealt with his bullies, his fears in the first one, but he's still growing and maturing. So of course, there's parts of his personalities that are going to remain the same. But again, my favorite thing about this is learning a little bit more about Mr. Miyagi, because he is the more interesting character as this franchise goes on. With this particular one, the storyline is Mr. Miyagi gets a letter from his home village in Okinawa that his father is very, very sick. And so he decides to fly to Okinawa to visit his father. And Daniel goes with him. And then they deal with a lot of the unresolved issues that made Mr. Miyagi leave Okinawa to begin with. Which, during the scene where Mr. Miyagi is packing, he reveals that the reason why he left Okinawa was because of a girl. He fell in love with this girl that was already promised to be married to his best friend, character Sato. Now, even though many, many decades have gone by, the whole idea of honor and being dishonored is something that is taken very seriously in this culture. And this was the first time I was exposed to this idea of like, oh, okay, what is honor? What does that mean? And to kind of see it characterized in this way was really interesting. I've never heard of it, so to see it be so serious was kind of, I think, a great exposure for it, because then you can, I think, wrap your mind around, what this actually means reputation-wise or personally. And so the moment they arrive in Okinawa, they are confronted with Sato, and how at first you see that Mr. Miyagi is very, very happy to see him. He's his old friend. But Sato clearly has not forgotten that he was dishonored by Miyagi, and was like, all right, we need to settle this. It's been decades in the making. You and I have to fight. And so the rest of the movie is Miyagi trying to resolve the issues with his family, with his village, and also trying very, very hard not to fight Sato at the end. Now, some of the downsides of the movie, you know, I never noticed it as a kid growing up. I saw it over and over again. It was a running joke in my house that I probably saw the movie like 50 times. And then every time they asked me when I watched it again, I would just up the number. The fight scenes are very weak. And I didn't expect it to be so strong. Like it's not like the first one is amazing, but it's supposed to be real life stakes. So the fact that the fight scenes are very slow and not realistic, it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. And there are some aspects of Miyagi's storyline that I wish could have been given a little bit more breathing room. For example, there's a scene where Miyagi tries to go talk to Sato at his house, and he's practicing like this karate chop on this big block of wood. And they're, going back and forth about things, and Miyagi's trying to have him just kind of let it go. And Sato walks away, and Miyagi says to him, "What happened to you?" And that could have been a really interesting scene for them to kind of like, all right, let's go through what happened when you left. So that way you can understand a little bit more of where Sato comes from. His basically squashing the beef at some point happens really, really fast. And I kind of wish there was some extra moments to kind of let that happen in a more organic way because it was so sudden. And again, like the fight scenes in general, but the one at the very end is very, very weak and not realistic at all. Having said that, I love everything else about the movie. I love the exposure to this culture of the village in Okinawa. The Japanese tea ceremony is really great. Passing down the knowledge of martial arts, in this case from father to son, and how it's a bonding experience. You kind of see it a little bit more in this movie. And the music, absolutely incredible. It kind of builds on the themes of the first one in just an absolutely perfect way. Anyways, those are my thoughts. What about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, give me a follow, and I'll see you guys next time.